Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Isabel Brown Show. We are back on the grid after several days of a very unstable Wi-Fi and cell signal and the whole nine, but I know a ton of you have been asking. We are 100% safe. Our property has not been damaged in any way in the wake of Hurricane Helene, and we feel incredibly blessed to be on the Atlantic side of Florida at the moment because while we did get some wind and rain showers over the weekend, we certainly are not experiencing the devastation that so many of you and so many Americans are right now. So just to open up the show, before we dive into anything, I just want to say from the bottom of my family and I's hearts, we are praying for every single one of you who are affected by this storm, particularly on the Gulf side of Florida and through the Appalachian Mountains. I am devastated by the clips that we are seeing, very limited of which on social media, and really angry and frustrated that the media isn't appropriately covering the devastation that is going on. I am particularly pissed off at our president of the United States, who has said the federal government has given you everything they can give, even though they're totally comfortable giving billions more to Ukraine in the same week that entire communities have been just completely eviscerated off the map. So we are doing everything we can to draw attention to your situation. I know many other content creators who feel the same way, and we're going to be using our platform to try to draw more awareness to the true extent of the devastation that's happening. And just know that we are praying for each and every one of you affected by this, for any loss of your loved ones, your pets, your property. It is such a crazy reality what we're seeing online right now, and I can't even begin to imagine what so many of you guys are going through. We have a lot to talk about today on top of all of that, namely because today is Tuesday, October 1st, which is a big deal because in exactly 5 weeks from today, there's a big day happening on the calendar on November 5th, Tuesday, November 5th. If you don't already know, that is Election Day in the United States of America. And I don't know about you guys, but ever since July 13th, with the first assassination attempt against Donald Trump, this election to me feels wildly unprecedented in a million different ways, but largely because it only seems to be getting crazier as we inch closer to November 5th. So today's show is only about one topic, and we're going to dive in incredibly deep. But I want you to start paying attention to what the media sure as hell isn't going to tell you, to what candidates sure as hell are not going to tell you, but what every single voice in positions of power, largely establishment elite politicians on the left who have been in these positions of power for longer than twice the time that our generation has been alive, what they are all beginning to tell you in unison. That even though they're the ones screaming at you about how democracy is on the ballot and it's up to us to save democracy, they are actually just straight up beginning to tell you, no, we want to get rid of democracy, even though we're kind of pointing the finger and blaming the other guy for that. And we're going to get rid of civil rights and basic humanity in the process the minute you hand us a win. This is what is at stake in the United States on Election Day, 5 weeks from right now, today. And I want us to know exactly what we're getting ourselves into so that we can appropriately fight against it while we still have time. All of that to be said, I'm so glad each and every one of you are here tuning into the show, and we're going to be diving into all of that very, very deep here in just a second. But first, do me a huge favor and smash that follow or subscribe button to make sure you are always aware of when we post new videos, new interviews, new live streams, etc. Let us know who you are and where you're watching from in the live chat. And just want to give you guys a really quick heads up. Tonight is the vice presidential debate. There is only one vice presidential debate in most election cycles. It is happening tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern time, and we will be live reacting to this debate the exact same way we did with the presidential debate a few weeks ago. Who knows, you may or may not have a fun little surprise guest of my husband, since he doesn't have to work tonight during the debate. And boy, does he have a lot to share, a lot of feelings related to this election. So tune back in at 9 p.m. Eastern, and we will be covering that live, reacting, and providing some commentary on the other end of the debate with all of you guys. Okay, I told you, and I'm just going to say this up front, I told you that all of these people are starting to say the quiet part out loud. And they're starting to say it louder and louder and louder and louder with every passing day, that their primary objective, and I'll define the proverbial they for you here in a moment, but their primary objective is to end civil liberties, to end individual freedom, which is what our country is built upon. That is the very foundation of Western civilization, not just America and the United States. And specifically, how they're going to accomplish that is by overturning, rewriting, etc., the United States Constitution. I'm just saying, I've been putting this out there for a while, not just related to this election, but in pretty much everything they are seeking to accomplish. We've seen this through mass interference with freedom of speech on social media, because there aren't as many oversight opportunities for governance and regulation on social media as there are in the mainstream media, which at this point has basically just become a parroted talking head for the government. It's essentially state-sponsored propaganda. We've seen this in people's presidential campaigns, particularly in the last several weeks. We've seen this related to the government saying they want to fine you if you post medical misinformation online. We've seen this in the banning TikTok debate and why the United States government is so specifically targeting TikTok versus any other platform to silence or censor or outlaw in the United States. This has been the common thread for quite some time, all really boiling down to the First Amendment, which is first for a reason, of the United States Constitution. That our very country predicated upon the idea that you have the right to speak your mind freely, to criticize people in positions of power, to believe what you want to believe and worship who you intend to worship, not what you're given permission to gather freely with others and have this free exchange of ideas. These concepts and values that essentially are the building blocks of Western culture at large have slowly been being chipped away at by the proverbial they. And when I say they, I mean the large lump sum of people who essentially pull all of the puppet strings of power, both politically and culturally, in Western culture today. That looks like politicians who are so deeply entrenched in bureaucracy that they've been in positions of power, elected positions of power, longer than twice the time we've been alive. That's the Hillary and Bill Clintons, that's the John Kerrys, that's the all of the dynasties of the Bush family and the Cheney family. We're talking about the Obama family at this point. We're talking about Joe Biden in particular, and even Kamala Harris, who was first elected to office decades and decades and decades ago, not in Washington, but who has been part of this entrenched bureaucracy system for literally decades. But the proverbial they also includes the most powerful woke corporate CEOs on the planet. It includes powerful bureaucrats in other countries as well, and people who've created these social movements like the World Economic Forum, a la Klaus Schwab, people who are in bed with the United Nations and the World Health Organization. There is a network of elite individuals that we all talk about every single day as the proverbial they, who have been telling you the quiet part louder and louder and louder and louder with every passing day, that they want to eviscerate, essentially, democracy. Despite, of course, creating entire social awareness campaigns and presidential campaigns and social media campaigns and mainstream media campaigns, that democracy is at stake. If you care about democracy, you better keep us in positions of power because somebody else is going to destroy it, but we're not. Democracy is on the ballot. And if you don't vote for our people, the proverbial they endorse and support, then you're going to lose everything. But then they'll tell you out of their own mouth that democracies just aren't really cutting it anymore. that freedom and liberty just aren't really cutting it anymore to allow those people to continue to grip with the greatest strength they can their hold on power. I worked in Washington a few times. I worked for the U.S. Senate and I worked for the White House as an intern in the Trump administration. I went to graduate school in Washington and was taught from a lot of the top people at the WHO and the CDC and the FDA. And I've come to believe that there is only one thing that is more corruptible for an individual than money. We always say money corrupts. If you become wealthy, you become a totally different person. You lose your sense of what's right and wrong. You lose your grip on what's most important. Your priorities change. But there is one thing that is infinitely more corruptible than money. And that thing is power. And what you're seeing with this proverbial they, be it a politician in the United States Congress, a president of the United States, a member of the World Economic Forum, a wildly influential entrepreneur and philanthropist, you're watching power and the ability to control other people's lives corrupt and corrode the priorities of these individuals from the inside out, to the point that they become so addicted to it that they genuinely don't know how to survive if they're not controlling you. Maybe they didn't need to at first. Maybe they were adored by you at first. But as decades go on, and as more and more of the real story behind these people comes out, they need to control you in order to retain positions of power that has truly corrupted their soul. There are several clips making the rounds this week on social media from this proverbial they community actually admitting to you that they just want to get rid of freedom of expression. They just want to get rid of the First Amendment. They just want to get rid of freedom of speech. They just want to get rid of the U.S. Constitution. Or maybe that they even just want to get rid of democracy itself. And no, I'm not exaggerating. That's just actually where we are at today. But I don't want you to believe it from me. I want you to hear it from them. Because they are being incredibly honest what is at stake exactly 5 weeks from today. In fact, they tell you that the election is about these very issues. That exactly 5 weeks from today, America, you could continue to live in a quasi-free society. I think it would be foolish for any of us to claim that we still live in a truly free society. Or we could keep giving power to these corrupt, soulless, selfish individuals who will do anything they can to control you, including erasing any sense of civil liberties whatsoever. This first one is from our buddy John Kerry. Speaking this week to a gathering of the World Economic Forum, shocker, I want you to listen very closely to what John Kerry is telling you they want to accomplish.
And I think the dislike of and anguish over social media is just growing and growing and growing. And it's part of our problem, particularly in democracies, in terms of building consensus around any issue. It's really hard to govern today. You can't, there's no, the referees we used to have to determine what's a fact and what isn't a fact are kind of, been eviscerated to a certain degree.
So you heard that, right? This is the former Secretary of State, an American diplomat, a very prominent politician, and a very forward-facing figure of the Democrat Party in the United States today, telling the World Economic Forum, we in positions of power, the proverbial they, have anguish over social media platforms, over shows like this one, because it doesn't allow us to build consensus the same way we've traditionally built consensus in America in the past. The referees, his word, not mine, that we previously had in determining facts have been eviscerated. Because in your pocket, the average person can pick and choose who they listen to and what sources they seek out. So we can't referee, aka censor, what we want to censor to build consensus, which, let's be honest, really isn't building consensus. It has nothing to do with building a coalition of ideas, because that would require you to hear all of the ideas. No, he is telling you that they are going out of their way to only give you their side of the story, to brainwash you, to indoctrinate you. But oh, it gets better.
And people go and people self-select where they go for their news or for their information. And then you just get into a vicious cycle. So it's really, really hard, much harder to build consensus today than at any time in the 45, 50 years I've been involved in this. And there's a lot of discussion now about how you curb those entities in order to guarantee that you're going to have, some accountability on facts, et cetera. But look, if people go to only one source and the source they go to is sick and, has an agenda and they're putting out disinformation.
Ironic, I would say.
Our First Amendment stands as a major block to the ability to be able to just, hammer it out of existence. So,
our First Amendment, and I quote, stands as a major block to our ability to just hammer it out of existence. It being what the government, what the entrenched bureaucrats, what the elite deem to be misinformation. Do you believe me now? There have been people warning you about this for years. And everyone said, that's insane. Sure, they might want more regulation. Sure, they might want more control. Sure, they might want more government. But they could never just get rid of the Constitution. In order for us to build consensus, we have to consider curbing this problem of social media, said by John Kerry himself. But the First Amendment stands as a major roadblock in our journey to get there.
What we need is to win the ground, win the right to govern by hopefully having, winning enough votes that you're free to be able to implement change.
We need to win enough votes, we meaning the elite. I'm not even going to say the left. I mean, obviously he's saying the left here because they're talking about this in the context of the 2024 election. But I'm not even going to glorify this as just saying the Democrat Party or the left. He's saying the government. And this is part of the reason I changed my registration to be an independent several months ago. But the same people who are all in bed with one another, sometimes literally, because Washington is just so lovely and ironic that way. That's a tangent we're not going to go on right now. The same people who are all in bed together, who have been for longer than twice the time we've been alive, they need to win the ground. They need to win, in his words, the right to govern so that they can effectuate change. Change of what? Getting rid of our roadblocks. Eviscerating your constitutional right to seek out whatever information you want, free from the referees of the government, to eviscerate the First Amendment and the Constitution, and to do democracy their way. But are they even interested in doing democracy anymore? The World Economic Forum asks John Kerry. Listen very carefully to what he has to say.
Now, obviously, there are some people in our country who are prepared to implement change in other ways.
AKA Kamala Harris is prepared to implement that change.
And
so
that's
you're
really
questioning
dangerous.
really if democracy can survive unregulated social media.
I think democracies are very challenged right now and have not proven they can move fast enough or big enough to deal with the challenges that we are facing.
Democracies are our very challenge right now. And democracies have not yet proven that they can move fast enough and big enough to deal with the challenges that we are facing right now. Says the freaking party screaming at you at the top of their lungs that democracy is on the ballot. That democracy is at stake with who you vote for. That in order to preserve democracy, you only have one choice. to vote in the left when it is the left telling you out loud, yeah, we said democracy is on the ballot. We're blaming it on the other guy, but we mean it. Democracies aren't quick or big enough to handle the problems we're facing right now, to silence and censor ordinary people, to shut them up so that we can keep determining what are facts and what is fiction, so that we can be the referee on building consensus for the values of a society, not the people, we, the government. Democracies are not yet proven, says John Kerry. Okay?
And to me, that is part of what this race, this election is all about.
And that is what this election is all about. Continue going down the path of democracy or eviscerate it in the name of stopping misinformation and getting rid of the roadblocks to be the referee of what is true and what is not. Don't take it from me. Don't shoot the messenger. But I'm just telling you, the quiet part is getting louder and louder and louder the closer we get to Election Day. And this should royally piss you off. But it's not just John Kerry, who, yes, is a major figure in Democrat politics. He's a classic 80-year-old who's run for president like more times than I can possibly remember. He was the Secretary of State. He's been in politics and diplomacy for forever, like longer than anyone can even begin to remember. This is what I mean by the proverbial they. But it's not just politicians who are beginning to make this argument this week. In fact, the proverbial they also includes, who did I say, philanthropists and entrepreneurs who already feel like they have a right to govern and control your life. Bill Gates this week is making headlines for suggesting that perhaps America needs something like an AI program. The world, in fact, needs something like an AI program applied to each and every one of our devices to ban harmful speech. Again, don't take my word for it. Listen to World Economic Forum darling Bill Gates himself, because he will be more than glad to tell you.
You should have free speech, but if you're inciting violence, if you're causing people not to take vaccines, where are those boundaries that even the U.S. Should have rules? And then if you have rules, what is it? Is there some AI that encodes those rules because you have billions of activity and, if you catch it a day later, the harm is done?
We're going to listen to that again. Have no fear. It's nice to have free speech. It's nice to have free speech, but we need more rules. We already have rules, for the record. There are plenty of rules that have already been implemented to define the line of what is free speech and what is not. By the way, inciting actual violence, literally directly threatening someone on the status of a protected class, already not free speech. So they're just making up crap as they go here to make you feel better about it. But that's already something you can be prosecuted for. What he says second is interesting to me, or causing people to not take vaccines. That's a line we should draw to say that is no longer free speech. Again, we'll listen to it one more time. Don't take my word for it.
We should have free speech, but if you're inciting violence, if you're causing people not to take vaccines, where are those boundaries?
Where are the boundaries? Well, we have boundaries already, Bill. Thank you for asking. But if you're suggesting we need more boundaries, which it sounds like you are, your idea is to implement an AI program that just prevents those ideas from ever being shared in the first place?
That even the U.S. Should, have rules. And then if you have rules, what is it? Is there some AI that encodes those rules because you have billions of activity and, if you catch it a day later, the harm is...
If you catch it a day later, the harm is done. So essentially, the proverbial they want not only to put stricter guardrails on what they deem to be free speech, which changes by the frickin' minute, apparently, but also want to preemptively prevent anything that crosses those boundaries from ever being publicly shared. Because if you were to post something that was, I don't know, critical of how a certain vaccine was made, the damage is already done if it is out there on the internet. So how do we prevent that damage from ever being done in the first place? How do we prevent that? Maybe we develop an AI program that prevents you from ever hitting post where the current modern public square is on our screens. It's not enough to just outlaw freedom of expression. It's not enough to just end your ability to speak freely. They now need to regulate what you are allowed to think, what ideas you are allowed to interact with. This is literally 1984 come to life. This is the definition of Big Brother. This is groupthink in a nutshell. Because if they don't allow you to interact with an opposing idea, because that violates freedom of speech, that's how they stay in positions of power. And make no mistake about it, this will not be limited to inciting violence or even trying to have an open and honest conversation about certain vaccine protocols. This is about so much more. And criticizing the proverbial they will be next on the list. There are some people who just, no matter how hard we try to tell them we don't want them there, refuse to leave American politics and world diplomacy in general, despite everyone just begging them, please go away. We really, really don't enjoy your presence here or anywhere. And the queen of those people is, of course, Hillary Clinton herself. This week at a gathering of the Clinton Foundation, she started to say the quiet part out loud in some very, very bizarre ways. Again, don't take my word for it.
You liken yourself to Cassandra, the Greek mythological figure who could see the future and the prophecies, but was never believed. Putting that Cassandra hat on for the moment, but we're listening.
Weird AF, but okay.
What is something you see happening in the near future that we should be taking more seriously?
Well, I do think that the press needs a consistent the press that's not supporting Trump blatantly, very persistently, the press that's trying to be the press, be objective, be, reporting the facts.
Are they though? Are they though? Do we need to recall what happened at the ABC debate literally just a few weeks ago? Is the press trying to be objective or report the facts? All right, let's pretend they are for 2 seconds. Hillary's not happy about that.
The press needs a consistent narrative about the danger that Trump poses. Because, people may still look at the danger and say, I don't care. It doesn't affect me. I'm going to vote for him for X, Y, or Z. But okay. But at least people need to be woken up and given the facts about what he has done, is saying, and would do.
So she's saying already, we know already people who are woken up are aware of the fact that at this point, the press, the mainstream media, legacy media, is just a mouthpiece for what the proverbial they wants society to know. That's not new information. We've been aware of this for almost a decade at this point, ever since the era of fake news beginning to be explored and talked about in the public square. But it's not enough. It's not enough that the press still has the opportunity to be objective, even when they're not, still has the obligation, kind of, to their audience, even though they don't follow it, to just report the facts. Instead, in the next 5 weeks, if the proverbial they have their way, the press would have a consistent, nonstop, droning on negative narrative about one of the two presidential candidates for a United States president. They will say whatever it takes, however many times it takes, as loud as it takes, that one candidate is suitable to be president of the United States and the other is not. So they want even more of an alliance, even more of a force-fed narrative from a corrupt government to be fed to you through the mainstream media, through the press, as a propaganda machine. Even more than we have right now. She keeps going, though.
And I anticipate that, something will happen in October, as it always does. I
wonder what that could mean. I anticipate that something will happen in October, as it always does. In politics, there's a general term for this. It's called the October surprise, that usually something happens in the month leading up before the election that totally shakes things up. And that's kind of the basis of like every political TV show we have. It's an idea that's not new. But what could possibly happen in the month of October that hasn't already happened since July 13th? Can any of us even begin to answer that question? I mean, honestly, how much more insane could this election possibly get? I would love to know, to be honest. That would be a fascinating thought experiment.
Russians, as I said earlier, are very active in this election.
Yes.
We know the Iranians are active as well. Chinese uses TikTok, or they certainly did against Biden and for Trump, I think.
What? So now they're arguing that TikTok is dangerous because it's a Trump interference platform? Okay.
They're a little less pro-Trump right now. So you look at where people get their information, and they get their information largely from social media.
This sounds eerily similar. I want you to pay attention to what John Kerry said to the World Economic Forum. This is for the Clinton Global Initiative, separate organization, although they all work together. They're all literally in the same bed together. So who is giving these politicians these talking points? Who is setting the agenda of the narrative that the proverbial they all are saying in the same week? You heard John Kerry say it to the World Economic Forum. You heard Bill Gates say it, discussing technology development. And now you're going to hear Hillary Clinton say it to her own foundation, that social media is a problem. That freedom of expression, unregulated, even though it's highly regulated, online, that gives ordinary people the capacity to seek out their own information, their own news, their own commentary, it's an issue. And we're going to do something about it. Listen so closely because this is eerie.
And so the campaign is doing the best job it can to combat that, combat both domestic and foreign false disinformation.
According to who? Every single one of them used that word, disinformation.
But I anticipate there will be a full court press in October. The digital airwaves will be filled. And why does that matter? Because the press that is pro-Trump anyway.
Sorry, what? What press is pro-Donald Trump? I don't care if you are a Democrat, a Republican, a Libertarian, an Independent, or anything in between. Is anyone honestly believing that the press is pro-Trump? Too pro-Trump for Hillary Clinton. Too pro-Trump for John Kerry and Bill Gates, because they still have to report the facts. And instead, they need to have a constant negative perception of him being put out. Hillary Clinton's words, not mine. So as frustrated as she is that they can't control the press enough, social media is a much bigger problem.
Oftentimes, stories are put on digitally that then are picked up by, let's say, at Fox and others. And then those stories are stories, so the mainstream press reports on them, and so that story then takes on a life of its own. There will be concerted efforts to distort and pervert Kamala Harris, who she is, what she stands for, what she's done. I mean, look, the crazy story about me running a child trafficking operation out of a basement of a pizzeria.
I'm not going to comment on that, but the word pizzeria is an awfully interesting, intentional word choice there. Again, tangent for another time.
Don't laugh. Don't laugh. It was a huge story. And it got one young man in North Carolina to get in his car with his, assault rifle and drive up to liberate these non-existent children and shoot up a pizzeria in Washington, D.C. This is dangerous stuff. It starts online, often on the dark web. It migrates. It's picked up by the pro-Trump media.
Again, with the pro-Trump media. Where the hell is she getting this?
It's then reported on by everybody else, which makes sure it has about 100% coverage. And people believe it. So I don't know what it's going to be, but it will be something, and we'll have to work very, very hard to make sure that it is exposed.
In October. The October surprise. I don't know what it will be, but it will be something that we will sound the megaphones off of. We will be as loud as we possibly can about it.
As the lie that it is.
The exact same script for all three individuals. Disinformation, what we, the elite, the powerful, deem to be disinformation, is a problem and must be stopped. We can control it in the press, largely, to an extent, and we have been good at that, but there's still some loopholes there that we need to tighten up. We need to be the referees of, to use John Kerry's word. But where freedom of expression and free speech is the biggest problem is here. Is social media, is Instagram and YouTube and TikTok. Because there's this flawed idea that Western civilization is built upon, that you, an individual, have the right to make up your own mind. That you, the average citizen, are smart enough to discern between fact and fiction, but you need access to all of it to be able to appropriately discern. That you, the individual, have the right and responsibility to criticize people in positions of power when they have gotten far too corrupt. This flawed idea is threatening to only one group of people. And you can bet your ass you know exactly who that group of people is. All of this is happening in the same week, in different conversations, to different organizations, but clearly is originating from the same source. And call me crazy, I think the American people deserve to know what that source is. We deserve to know who the tippy top of the proverbial they is, calling the shots, writing the scripts, making these people their mouthpieces. Because this country was not founded upon the idea that we serve the government. In fact, the exact opposite. That we, the people, are their boss. That we, the people, make the choices that are appropriate for our values and for our future. That we, the people, have civil rights that can never be given or taken away from the government, taken away by the government. Because they are inherent to us, the citizenry, not to people pulling the levers of power. And you heard them all say this. This is what this election is really about. They're telling you that, not me. Not your favorite talking head on social media, not your favorite radio host, not your favorite columnist. They are telling you this is what this election is all about. And why, if you want real truth in society, if you want to end disinformation, heck, if you see democracy as the same threat we do, your only choice is Kamala Harris. I find no coincidence, by the way, that all of this is being said in the same last couple of weeks that some very bizarre headlines have begun to grace the propaganda machine of the government, state-sponsored propaganda, the mainstream media. The New Yorker, 2 days ago, put out this headline: "Is it time to torch the Constitution?" Some scholars say that the Constitution is to blame for our political dysfunction and that we need to start over. A few weeks ago, we talked about an article in the New York Times. The Constitution is sacred. Is it also dangerous? Dangerous. One of the biggest threats to America's politics might be the country's founding document. Whoever is writing the script for the proverbial they has control of the mainstream media already. And they are using every avenue that they possibly can. Every avenue that they possibly can. Of course, the silly things that we always do in elections, like celebrity endorsements and silly commercials running during your football games and all of that. That's not new. But by literally planting the idea in your head through repetitive conversation, through headlines in the mainstream media, through politicians saying things at press conferences, through these gatherings at the World Economic Forum and the Clinton Initiative and blah, 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 planting the idea in your head that the Constitution, the document upon which we get this crazy idea that you have rights, not the government, that the government works for you, is a threat, is threatening America's politics, is to blame for our political dysfunction, and that we need to throw this document out and start over entirely. That's what's at stake for the 2024 presidential election. And they're telling you that themselves. They're being honest with you that the First Amendment is a roadblock that we need to figure out how to overcome. That democracy hasn't really proven itself to be an efficient system in silencing and regulating disinformation from ordinary citizens. That social media needs to be so heavily regulated that we can prevent people from posting anything at all, to prevent any damage from being done. That is contrary to our narrative and our belief system as the elites in power. And total side tangent here, I also don't find it coincidental at all that randomly in the last week, members of the United States Congress have put together a, shocker, constitutional amendment. I don't know if you guys have heard about this. We'll talk about it on the show later this week. That U.S. lawmakers have banded together to change the Constitution to prepare for a possible mass casualty event. Proposing an amendment to the Constitution that would change various lines of succession in a moment of a national crisis. October surprise? Is that the crazy thing that might end up happening based on the prediction from the all-knowing, all-wise goddess Hillary Clinton herself? I don't know. I don't know if anything will happen in October. But I do know this. There are evil, corrupt people who are doing everything they can to gaslight and brainwash and indoctrinate you into handing them your most basic human rights on a silver platter and thank them for taking them away from you. No matter where you fall on the political spectrum, no matter who you have supported right now or in the past at any time, no matter how you would categorize yourself with a color in political America, no matter what letter sits next to your name on your party registration, this should terrify you. And more importantly, terrify you into action. Because we have 5 weeks. 5 weeks from today to determine if we still want a United States Constitution, if we still want a democratic republic built upon the idea that you are the boss that elects your representative into a democratic system of government. We have 5 weeks to decide if we even want access to seek out freely what we want to seek out for news and information and commentary. 5 weeks. And if we keep rolling our eyes and saying, it's just another election, what's going to happen? It couldn't really be that bad. I am warning you now, in 5 weeks' time, the ball will already be rolling down the hill way too fast for us to catch it. And come January, mid-January, we will lose the opportunity to have this conversation entirely. Do not give them that satisfaction. And speak up loudly. Scream from the rooftops. Share this video everywhere you possibly can before it is too late. We are incredibly, incredibly grateful to be able to work with some amazing sponsors on the Isabel Brown Show, companies that care just as much with just as much of a sense of urgency as you guys care about these issues. One of which is our friends over at Public Square, America's largest and fastest growing marketplace of all small businesses that are pro-family, pro-freedom, and pro-faith. I am so inspired to see the impact that they have made in spurring business owners into action to change values, not just in people's minds, but also in where we spend our money and what businesses we support. And I told you guys the other day on Instagram, I am going to be at Public Square's first ever business summit in Orlando next week, October 10th and 11th. And I would love to see you guys there. You can get a discount on your ticket. If you live in Florida, you absolutely should come. If not, you guys should consider taking the trip down. You can get a discount on your ticket using the code Isabel, Isabel, one big word, on their website. They have some amazing speakers like Bethany Hamilton and Russell Brand and Tucker Carlson and some really, really inspiring individuals who I know you will love to hear from, and I would love to see you guys there as well. So please consider joining us. And most importantly, there is a bigger tool at play that we can use, even beyond casting our vote, to impact American and Western culture at large, and that is prayer. And I say all the time, prayer should never be our last line of defense against evil. It should always be our first line of offense. And there has been nothing in my life that has transformed my prayer life more substantially than using Hallow, America's largest Christian prayer app. They have quite literally thousands of prayers on their platforms, and also podcast episodes and meditations and mental health resources and everything you can possibly imagine to make spirituality and conversing with God the number one priority in your life. Please, 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 if you do nothing else today, please consider downloading the Hallow app if you haven't already, and you can get a 3-month free trial for all of their incredible services if you go to hallow.com, hallow.com/Isabel. We have got to pray for the radical conversion of the souls of the people that we just reacted to, but also of the preservation of God-given rights in Western civilization before we let them slip away forever. So tonight, please hit your knees. Please pray for our country, and let's keep finding truth. We are back tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern to live react to the vice presidential debate, and we'll be back for more of the Isabel Brown Show this week. Love you all very much. Don't forget to smash that follow or subscribe button if you haven't already, and we will see you next time.